Please subscribe. It helps a lot.
I turned 65 last fall, though most mornings I still rose like I always did. 42 years aboard the Zephyr did that to a person, gave you a sense of duty no matter what ached. I knew the sound of every curve through the Sierra Nevada, recognized the way light shifted across the dining car, depending on whether we were moving east or west. People came and went, seasonal workers, conductors rotating off, but I stayed. I served coffee, wiped up spilled tomato soup, poured wine for honeymooners who'd forget my name by the next stop. It never bothered me. Being part of something in motion was always enough. Most of my co-workers called me Richie. Passengers never did. They stuck with Richard, or Sir, or didn't use my name at all. That too I didn't mind. What unsettled me lately were the nights. Something shifted, some crack in my routine that sleep could no longer seal. It started with headaches, thin lines of pain above my ears, which clung through dinner service, and deepened by the time we crossed into Utah. The crew chalked it up to age or stress, and I played along. I'd smile, down a glass of water, maybe sit in the last booth after hours. But I knew better. There was something threaded through the pain, something I couldn't place. The dreams began around the same time. Not dreams exactly. Places, voices, smells. I would lie down in my bunk at the end of the day, and when I closed my eyes, I'd be somewhere else entirely. A train, yes, but older. The lights flickered differently, golden and soft, humming low like candlelight. The smell of roast beef and cigars hung in the air. My hands, young again, strong, no veins pushing through skin, held silverware wrapped in cloth napkins, and I wore a uniform I'd never seen in my waking life. Crisp white jacket, thin black tie, shiny shoes without a scratch. It made no sense. I was born in 1960. This train belonged to the decade before. I tried telling myself it was nothing. A mind full of memories, too many years spent between rails and ridgelines. But the dreams grew sharper, more persistent. I began to expect them. I found myself walking slower through the real train, staring too long at the ridges outside Glenwood Springs, half expecting the world to shift. It never did. But the strangest part, the part I still hesitate to say aloud, was him. Gary. Even now, saying his name carries a weight I didn't expect. He'd worked the same route long ago. It was the summer of '87. I hadn't thought about him in years. Maybe I pushed it away. He was only 23. He'd joined mid-season, wide-eyed and eager, always asking questions about the routes, the schedules, the right way to hold a wine bottle when pouring. I remember thinking he wouldn't last the month. But he did. His laugh lit up the galley. The passengers adored him. One older woman tipped him with a gold bracelet. He gave it to his sister, said he didn't need fancy things. And then one afternoon, he was gone. We were somewhere near Soldier Summit. I'd stepped away for maybe 5 minutes to deal with a complaint in the sleeper car. When I came back, Gary lay on the floor between two tables, face pale, eyes wide open, but unfocused. A piece of meat, flank steak, I think, lodged in his throat. They said it was fast. Said even if I'd been there, I couldn't have done much. Still, I spent years replaying those minutes, wondering, blaming, grieving quietly because we were co-workers and nothing else. At least, not in the way people needed to see to believe it. He wasn't supposed to be in my dreams. That's what made them different from memory. In those dreams, he looked the same age he was when he died, but dressed as if he'd stepped out of a photograph taken 30 years earlier. Always seated near the rear of the dining car. Always watching me, not with malice, but with a kind of softness I couldn't explain. The first time I saw him, I woke with a jolt, heart racing. I told myself it was stress. Maybe I'd read his name somewhere on an old roster. But the second time, he spoke. He said, You always moved like you were carrying the whole train on your back. I didn't answer. I couldn't. By the fourth dream, he reached across the table, touched my hand. His skin felt warm, solid, more real than the cold thermos I gripped on waking. The headache always followed, a dull throb behind my eyes, pulsing in rhythm with the train's wheels. I stopped telling anyone. There was no point. What would they say? I needed rest. I was lonely. They'd be right. I'd spent my whole life in motion, moving from station to station, table to table, without ever asking where I was heading. And now the dreams, Gary, seemed more tangible than the life I returned to each morning. Something was waiting in those dreams. I could feel it. And each time I opened my eyes to the familiar hum of the zephyr, I felt a little more like I didn't belong. The first time it felt real, I didn't wait gasping or drenched in sweat. I woke calmly, hours later, but the shape of it stayed, bright, whole, like something folded into my lungs and left there. In the dream, I stood in the middle of the old dining car. This one had mahogany paneling, brass trim polished, frosted sconces, casting a warm glow against the etched glass. Each table, set with bone-white china and silverware, so polished, I saw my own reflection in the back of a spoon. I knew, somehow, this wasn't a reconstruction. This wasn't a museum piece or a clever set. It breathed. It rolled beneath me. I could feel the low, steady pull of the track. The car swayed with a rhythm so intimate, I wanted to close my eyes and listen to it forever. Then I looked down. My hands were young, smooth skin, no sunspots, no ridged veins. I wore a uniform crisp enough to snap if I turned too fast. White jacket with a folded napkin tucked into my belt, black trousers with a sharp crease, polished shoes which didn't belong to the feet I knew in waking life. I raised a hand to my face. Even this felt unfamiliar. Tight skin, strong jaw, no hint of time's long toll. I knew what age I was. 22, maybe 23. The windows framed a dark canyon, Utah in twilight. Red stone layered deep into shadow. I knew the shape of the landscape. I'd stared at it through modern glass for 4 decades, always with some passenger, asking whether those cliffs were natural or how deep the drop went. But here, the windows curved slightly at the edges, and the glass held a tint, old world tint, like looking through a bottle. The sky bled violet and gold. I moved between tables with practiced ease, though I'd never trained for this kind of service. Each step fell exactly where it belonged. My body remembered, even if my mind did not. The first man I passed raised his glass in silence. His lips curved into a smile, but it didn't reach his eyes. He blinked. Once, maybe. But the motion looked delayed, like it hadn't been his decision. Another woman stirred cream into her coffee and never looked up. Her hand moved in perfect circles, over and over, as though caught in a loop. When I greeted her, she said nothing. Her smile widened by a fraction, then froze in place. I scanned the rest of the room. The passengers, all of them, wore clothes which hadn't been in fashion since Eisenhower. But this wasn't what unsettled me. They looked at me like I was a long-lost relative, like someone who finally came home. Their expressions never shifted. Their heads turned slowly as I moved. They tracked me, politely, as if I belonged to them. I felt no fear, only a mounting confusion which sat heavy behind my ribs. And then I saw him. He sat alone at the corner table by the window, elbows resting on the linen, fingers tapping once against a ceramic cup. Gary. He looked up and smiled. Not the strange, plastered expression the others wore. His smile belonged to no era. It belonged to him, and it brought me to a full stop. His hair was combed neatly, jacket buttoned, tie snug against his collar. He looked the same as the day he died. Exactly the same. not a day older. But now he lived. His eyes glinted with something like mischief, something like recognition. He lifted a hand in greeting, a lazy wave I'd seen 100 times before. Once, it had been the way he told me everything was fine, even when it wasn't. I didn't move. I couldn't. My legs refused to obey. He stood and crossed to me. No one else turned. No one else moved. The sound of his shoes over the carpet came clear, sharp, real. He stopped an arm's length away. "You remember me?" he asked. His voice sounded like it always did, gentle, unassuming. It cracked a little at the edges, the way it used to when he got nervous talking to superiors. I tried, but no words followed. He reached out, touched the sleeve of my jacket. His fingers settled lightly there, real enough to send a quiet shudder through me. The air between us felt different from the rest of the car, like we stood inside a pocket of truth while everything else played at being real. "You're not dreaming," he said. "You're remembering." Then he stepped back, returned to his seat, and lifted the coffee cup to his lips. Before I could follow, the light dimmed slightly, and I felt the floor shudder beneath me, not from the train, but from within myself. A pull, like the tide shifting. When I opened my eyes, I was back in my bunk, the ceiling above me blank and gray. But I knew it wasn't a dream, not anymore. The real train started to feel less real. At first, I blamed the headaches. They sharpened in the hours before sleep and lingered long after morning. I kept a bottle of ibuprofen in my jacket pocket and lied to the others about my vision. Sometimes, the aisles tilted too far to one side, even when the car was still. I bumped into tables I'd cleared for decades without once clipping a corner. The world behind my eyes began to glow faintly at the edges, a soft gold, like the light from those dream sconces bleeding into daylight. I still worked every shift, but I moved slower. Passengers asked if I was all right. Some said I looked tired. A younger server, Jules, offered to split her tips if I let her take the late night runs. I thanked her, smiled, and said I'd be fine. And I meant it, because when I was awake, I stayed anchored in a version of myself I could understand. It was only when I slept that I drifted. The dreams resumed without gaps. I stepped into them, mid-thought, mid-conversation. The same vintage train, same brass-trimmed car, gliding through canyons caught in endless dusk. Time no longer looped. It unraveled, spilling forward in fragments. I stopped asking how. I started asking when. Gary met me more often now, always in the same booth near the back, the one with the view of the cliffs. Sometimes he'd be waiting with 2 cups of coffee, both steaming. Sometimes I'd find him with his hands folded, eyes watching the door like he expected me. We didn't speak much at first, but we didn't need to. He'd gesture for me to sit. I'd slide into the seat across from him, fingers trembling a little over the tablecloth, and he'd ask how I was, not in a casual way. He looked into me, not at me, like he saw the ache I didn't know how to name. One night, after what felt like hours sitting in silence, he said, "They're not mad yet." "Not really, but they will be." I asked who. He didn't answer. His eyes moved past me to the rest of the car. That was when I began to notice them, the passengers. Their movements became more rehearsed, more puppet-like. Conversation stopped the moment I got near. Smiles froze mid-laugh. Some of them turned their heads to follow me in unison, like birds tracking motion with sharp little eyes. One man, a tall figure with a jaw too square to be real, stared at me with such intensity I nearly dropped the plate I was carrying. When I asked if he needed anything, he said, "You weren't supposed to come back," and returned to his soup without moving his mouth again. Another night, a woman with a pearl necklace tugged my sleeve and whispered, "He can't save you." I asked who she meant. She only repeated the sentence, softer each time, until her lips stopped moving altogether. In waking hours, I began to slip. I poured tea for a couple in the observation car and called the woman Mrs. Renner. She blinked and asked how I knew her name. I didn't. I'd only seen her face in the dream, seated beside Gary, the night he told me he'd once tried to leave the train and got turned around in the corridor for hours. "There's no exit," he'd said then, smiling too gently. "Not unless you're ready." I started avoiding sleep, tried to outpace it like it was something I could outrun. I drank strong coffee at midnight and paced the staff corridors long after final call. But when sleep came, it dragged me under with greedy hands. I'd blink on one side of the world and open my eyes on the other, and the line between them grew thinner each time. One evening, I found myself in the dining car, real dining car, setting a table for the Denver stretch. When I turned around, the entire space looked older. The lights dimmed, flickered gold. I saw Gary's reflection in the glass before I saw him. I blinked, hard, and it was gone. That night in the dream, he held my hand. He didn't say anything at first. He traced a circle against my palm with his thumb and looked past me at the darkening cliffs. The train rattled quieter than usual, a soft hum beneath us. Maybe a warning? I asked him what was happening to me. He looked at me then, and for a moment I saw something break behind his eyes. "They are jealous. You're closer than they were at this stage," he said. "Closer to choosing." "Choosing what?" He pulled his hand back. "You'll know before I can tell you." I wanted to hold on to him, to drag him into a truth I could understand. But he turned his face toward the window, and the cliffs outside twisted, sharp and wrong, like they'd been carved by a different hand entirely. I woke with his warmth still on my skin and a taste in my mouth like ash. By morning, I'd forgotten which side of the dream I was waking from. I didn't sleep anymore. I crossed over. No jolting transitions. No half-waking confusion. One moment I fluffed my pillow in my roomette of the modern Zephyr, watching my coffee go cold. The next, I was standing in the corridor of the old train again, the carpet beneath my feet, worn soft by time, the sconces glowing low, like embers about to go out. I wasn't tired anymore either. I wasn't anything. Hunger didn't come. Thirst didn't register. I didn't check my watch. I didn't miss the ticking. This time the car was empty. No passengers. No waitstaff. No quiet, stilted conversations from faceless travelers. Only silence. Thick. Pressing. The kind of silence which means something's waiting to speak. Gary wasn't there. I walked the length of the train. The windows passed like flickering frames in an old film. The canyons beyond, lit in a dusk which never deepened, never relented. When I opened the door to the next car, I stepped into something colder. The air changed. I knew someone was waiting for me before I saw him. The conductor stood near the back of the car, tall, impossibly tall. Not in a monstrous way, but in a way which bent the scale of things around him. His hat sat straight, black uniform pressed, hands gloved in white. He didn't look like the others. His face moved when he blinked. His mouth worked naturally when he spoke. But there was something missing. Not malice, not warmth. Something in between. "Mr. Haley," he said, without needing to ask. "You've been with us longer than you realize." I opened my mouth. Nothing came. He turned and walked to a set of double doors I'd never noticed before. His gloved hand reached toward the handle, then stopped. "We don't offer this to everyone," he said. "Some folks pass through in their sleep, never seeing it for what it is. Others refuse to see, and the train keeps rolling." I stepped closer. "What is this?" I asked. The conductor tilted his head slightly, as if impressed I could still ask. "This," he said, "is a question." I waited. He turned to face me fully. For the first time, his expression shifted, something like gentleness passing across it. though it didn't settle long. "You may get off at the next stop," he said, "but only if you want to." He said it like it mattered, not as a threat, not as mercy, as a choice, one that waited behind those doors, wrapped in silence, ready to unfold the moment I stepped through. I looked past him. Through the little window, I saw only dark hills and a slice of starlight. No station, no platform, only the promise of somewhere else. "I'm dead," I said. He didn't nod. He didn't deny it. He only looked at me with something that might have been respect. "Not quite," he said, "but close enough for the choice to count." I felt something in my chest go quiet. Not the panic of loss or the cold pull of regret. Only quiet. Stillness. "Where does the train go?" I asked. He considered this. "Some believe it's penance," he said. "Some think it's memory. A few call it waiting. I wouldn't name it at all." "And the others?" He glanced behind me, though the car was still empty. "They chose to stay, or didn't know they were choosing. Either way, they're passengers now. Some don't know they are only here by their own choosing. All are free to leave at any stop." I thought of their frozen smiles, their tracking eyes, the ones who whispered warnings. I thought of Gary, his warmth, his quiet presence, his sadness, like something he carried in both hands. The conductor stepped aside. His gloved hand opened the door. "You may leave," he said again. "No tricks, no cost." The air behind the door moved slightly. It carried no scent, no sound. I stood there a long time. I thought of the dining car where Gary waited for me some nights, the look in his eyes when I asked questions he wouldn't answer. I thought of the real Zephyr, somewhere far from here, with stainless steel walls and passengers who couldn't remember my name. "Will he be here?" I asked. The conductor's expression didn't change, but I felt something shift again, something underneath us both. "He will, as long as it's what he keeps choosing." I stepped away from the door. It closed on its own, slow and final. When I turned, the car behind me was full again. Passengers looked up, one by one, not smiling, not frowning, just watching. And Gary sat in the last booth, hands folded on the table, waiting. I took the first step toward him. The train hummed beneath my feet. I didn't look back. Gary didn't smile when I sat down. He didn't need to. Something softer passed between us, something neither of us had language for. We moved beyond words. I eased into the booth across from him. My hands settled on the table, inches from his. They didn't shake this time. "I stayed," I said, after a while. Gary nodded once, as though he'd already known. "I hoped you would." His voice still carried the calm, even tone. But now I heard what was beneath it. Relief, tempered with something heavier. Maybe guilt. Maybe hope. Outside the windows, the light shifted. We were leaving the cliffs. Ahead, the track curved gently into a wide canyon, lit with golden sun. The stone walls stretched high above, glowing as if lit from within. I'd seen this place many times before, but now it looked entirely different. I remembered looking out and feeling some echo stir in my ribs. I hadn't known it then, but I recognized it now. "Do you know what's at the next stop?" I asked. Gary looked out the window, his profile cut sharp by the sunlight. "I don't," he said. "No one does, not really. Some passengers vanish when the doors open. Some get younger. Some stay the same." His fingers tapped once, lightly, on the table. He didn't look at me when he said, "Some of us weren't ready to move on." I understood then. This wasn't his first ride. "How long have you been here?" He took a breath like someone preparing to exhale a story too long to tell. "I don't measure it," he said. "There are no clocks. Times just wait. And when it's heavy enough, you know." The dining car filled with a golden hush. The passengers no longer stared. They seemed to exist on another wavelength now, blurred at the edges, like sketches fading into memory. Whatever had once animated their tension had gone out of them, or maybe out of me. What made you stay? I asked. He looked at me then. His eyes were full of something raw, not sadness, not joy, something between. I wanted to see you again. The ache bloomed slow in my chest, a blooming I couldn't stop, didn't want to. For a long time, I'd lived with a hollow I hadn't named, a space where love might have grown if I'd ever let it. There were moments in my life, brief and quiet, when I'd felt it, glimpses, nothing more, but I never reached out, never said the words, until now. I remember the day you died, I said. He nodded, faintly. I know. You choked in the dining car. I was 29. I watched them carry you away. You were almost a stranger to me then. I didn't know anything about you. You knew, he said gently, even if you wouldn't let yourself. I swallowed against the lump rising in my throat. I thought it was grief. I thought I was upset because it happened on my shift, but it followed me for years. You were in the back of my mind every time I set a plate down. You weren't supposed to remember, he said, more to himself than to me. Most don't, but something about you held on. Outside, the canyon opened wider. The train curved toward a bridge, and sunlight flooded the car so brightly we cast long shadows across the floor. I reached across the table. He didn't hesitate. His fingers closed around mine, warm, solid, real. The silence between us shifted into something light. For the first time in decades, I felt no hurry, no pressure, no voice at the back of my head counting the seconds. I didn't need to look at my watch. Gary leaned forward slightly. I don't know where we're going, he said, but I think it's somewhere better. I smiled, slow and quiet. I don't need to know. I want to see it. With you. We sat this way as the train rolled forward. No more whispers. No more watchers. The conductor never returned. There was only the hum of motion, the warmth of the sun, and the sound of the rails pulling us onward. Out there, the next stop waited, whatever it was. It didn't scare me anymore. Finally, it filled me with wonder.
Please make sure you are subscribed and be one of the strange.